I want to speak to my amendment, amendment number 22. Look, at the outset, Minister, I've heard the comments from colleagues here in relation to data centres. And as you know from the records within your own department, this is something that I had been highlighting during my term in the department back in 2017 and 2018. And on foot of that, the government published a statement on the role of data centres in Ireland, which had a substantial section in it in relation to the issue and challenges regarding energy infrastructure. And the difficulty is today, Minister, 1 in 7 megawatts that is generated on this island is being consumed by data centres. And that is set, I think, to double, if not treble, between now and 2030. The fact is that the vast majority of the growth that we're going to see in terms of electricity consumption over this decade is going to be as a result of data centres. And the policy statement that was adopted by government in June of 2018 clearly set out a prioritisation that data centres should only go on the grid where the electricity supply is available for them, and that we would prioritise the connection of data centres that have an employment dividend associated with them, rather than facilitating speculative data centres that have sadly been connected to the grid. Now, the difficulty with all of this is the cost of this 650 megawatts, which is roughly the amount of electricity that's going into the data centres today. The cost of that in the PSO to every single householder in this country is going to be €40 per household. And that is what they are going to have to pay to actually subsidise the generation of electricity going into these data centres. On top of that, they will also have to pay the costs, the transmission and distribution costs of actually bringing that electricity into those data centres. So what I have tabled here on amendment number 22, Minister, is that the government would pass on the cost of supplying electricity to data centres to the operators of those data centres, rather than families who are struggling at the moment to pay their electricity bill and asking them to pay another €40 to cover the cost of this electricity going into the data centres. I think it's immoral in the middle of an emergency, an energy emergency, where families are faced with astronomical costs, that we are asking them to put their hands into their pocket to actually subsidise the electricity going into data centres. And what I'm asking is, Minister, that within 180 days of the passage of this Act, that you would bring forward proposals to ensure that data centres pay for the cost of their own electricity and not expect families to do that. Now, I was interested, Minister, in the point you were making in your contribution earlier. You're talking about meeting our 80% renewable electricity target by 2030. But as you know, Minister, EirGrid have set themselves a target of managing renewable electricity on the grid of 70% by 2030. And they have not budged from that. They only have a plan up to 70%. They're publicly stating they're working towards a plan of delivering 70% renewable electricity onto the grid by 2030, not 80%, which is the government target. And if we are not planning today, in 2022, to manage 80% electricity on the grid by 2030, we will be coming back with further emergency legislation to deal with further crises because of the lack of planning. And we've seen it in relation to what we have here before us. Part of it is as a result of the allowing data centre after data centre to connect to the grid. Part of it is closing down old plant without backup plant being in place. Part of it is an underestimation of where we're going to be. And part of it is because of the abandonment of contracts by semi-state companies. And yet, we are now asking for all of those mistakes, all of the people that we are paying to plan our electricity grid, who are being paid significant sums of money in terms of service fees that we're paying through our electricity bill. We're now asking every single home in this country to pay another €40 each year for the next 3 years to actually compensate them for the failures that they made in actually projecting out in relation to our electricity demands. And sadly, it is the people who are struggling to pay their electricity bills who are going to do this. So I'm asking you, Minister, as a very simple request, and that is, let the data centres pay for their own electricity. Any of them that are here creating jobs are very wealthy multinational companies who are quite willing to pay for the cost of their electricity. We need to put the mechanism in place. And any of them that are here on a speculative basis, they should cough up as well, because they're out just to make a buck for themselves, and it shouldn't be on the backs of hard-pressed families across this country. The final point I'll make to you, Minister, is in June of 2018, in black and white, the Cabinet said that they would have to look at mechanisms to ensure that the PSO levies for consumers are not being burdened with the cost of the additional charges resulting in data centres being connected to the grid. Since June of 2018, Minister after Minister has failed abysmally to address that particular issue, and that is why we're now asking families to pay an extra €40 to pay for the cost of this electricity.